The city screamed with life. But all I could hear was the thud of my own heart as Mason grabbed my wrist and pulled me into the thrift store. "You're turning 25, Elliot, and I'm not letting you spend it moping," he said, his voice sharp with that stubborn edge I'd known since high school. I didn't expect what came next, not the gift, not the moment, not the way it would unravel everything I thought I knew about us. San Francisco's Mission District buzzed around us, a kaleidoscope of murals, street vendors, and laughter spilling from open bars. It was October, crisp and golden, the kind of evening that made you feel alive just breathing it in. Mason, my best friend since we were awkward teens in Sacramento, had insisted on dragging me out for my birthday. I'd wanted a quiet night, maybe pizza and a movie, but Mason had other plans. He always did. "You need something bold," he said, rifling through a rack of vintage jackets with the focus of a man on a mission. His broad shoulders moved with purpose. The sleeves of his denim shirt rolled up to reveal forearms tanned from weekend hikes. Mason was the kind of guy who walked into a room and owned it confident. Straight. The all-American type who dated cheerleaders in high school and now charmed baristas with a single grin. Me. I was the opposite, lanky, quiet, perpetually stuck in my head, and openly gay since I was 17. We'd been an odd pair from the start, but somehow, we worked. I leaned against a display of mismatched hats, watching him. "Mason, I don't need a jacket. My closet's already a thrift store explosion." He ignored me, pulling out a garish red blazer with gold buttons. This is you." He held it up, smirking, his blue eyes catching the store's dim lights. I laughed despite myself, shaking my head. That was Mason, always pushing, always teasing, always making me feel like I could be more than the anxious mess I often was. We'd met in sophomore year when he'd punched a bully for calling me a slur in gym class. He didn't know me then, didn't know me anything, but he stepped in anyway. That was Mason, loyal to a fault, even when it got him detention. Over the years, we'd built a friendship that weathered everything, me coming out, his messy breakups, our move to San Francisco after college. He was my constant, the one person who never flinched when I talked about my crushes or my fears. But he was straight, untouchably, undeniably straight. I'd made peace with that years ago, or so I thought. "Try it on," he said, tossing the blazer at me. I caught it, rolling my eyes but indulging him. The store was a maze of racks and mirrors, smelling of old leather and patchouli. A few other shoppers milled around, their voices blending with the indie music playing overhead. I slipped on the blazer, striking a dramatic pose in front of a full-length mirror. "What do you think? Am I ready for the runway?" Mason's grin faltered for a split second, his eyes lingering on me in a way I couldn't quite read. "You look good," he said, quieter than usual. Before I could process it, he turned away, grabbing another Jaquita leather one, dark and sleek. "This one's mine. We're matching tonight." "Matching?" I raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you care about coordinating outfits?" "Since it's your birthday, and I'm making it epic," he shot back, already heading toward the counter. "My treat. Consider it part one of your gift." I followed, protesting half-heartedly. "Mason, you don't have to." "Shut up, Elliot," he said, handing the cashier his card without breaking eye contact with me. "You're getting the jacket. And that's not even the real gift." My stomach twisted, curiosity sparking. "What's the real gift?" He just smirked, that infuriating, charming smirk that always meant trouble. "You'll see." We stepped back onto the street, the jackets slung over our shoulders like we were characters in some indie film. The city pulsed around us, alive with possibility. Mason led the way, weaving through the crowd toward a bar he swore had the best live music in the city. I didn't know it then, but that night would crack open something between us, something raw, fragile, and terrifyingly beautiful. Inside the bar, the air was thick with the scent of beer and anticipation. A local band played on a small stage. Their music a mix of soulful chords and gritty lyrics. Mason ordered us drinks whiskey for him. Gin and tonic for me. We found a spot near the back, leaning against a graffitied wall. The crowd was eclectic, tattooed artists, tech bros, queer couples holding hands. I felt at home here, but I kept stealing glances at Mason, wondering why he'd chosen this place. He wasn't homophobic, far from it, but he usually stuck to sports bars or hiking trails, not queer-friendly dives like this. So, I said, sipping my drink, "What's with the vibe tonight? You're acting weird." He laughed, but it was tight, like he was holding something back. "Weird? Nah. Just wanted to do something special for you." "Special how?" I pressed, my voice light, but my heart starting to race. Mason wasn't the secretive type. If he was planning something, it was big. He took a long sip of his whiskey, his eyes fixed on the band. "You've been there for me through a lot. He said finally, his voice low. "Breakups, job stress, all of it. I wanted to give you something real for your birthday." I tilted my head, trying to read him. "The jacket's pretty real. And ridiculous." He chuckled, but his expression shifted, something serious creeping in. "That's not it. Just wait. Okay. You'll get it soon." The band launched into a new song, and the crowd cheered, pulling my attention. But my mind was on Mason, on the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers tapped nervously against his glass. I'd seen him like this before, but never with me, never about me. As the night wore on, we danced, laughed, and drank more than we should have. Mason was looser now, his arms slung around my shoulders as we swayed to the music. I let myself lean into him, just for a moment, pretending it meant more than it did. But then he pulled away, his face suddenly serious. He said, his voice cutting through the noise. "I need to show you something. Outside." My heart stuttered. "Now?" "Yeah, now." He grabbed my hand, not my wrist. My hand and led me through the crowd, out into the cool night air. The street was quieter now, the city settling into a softer rhythm. Mason stopped under a streetlight, his breath visible in the chilly air. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped box, no bigger than a deck of cards. "Happy birthday," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stared at the box, my hands trembling as I took it. "Mason, what is this?" "Open it," he said, his eyes locked on mine. I tore off the wrapping, my fingers clumsy with nerves. Inside was a simple silver keychain, engraved with 2 words, "You are enough." My throat tightened. I told him those words years ago, after his last breakup, when he felt like he'd failed everyone. He'd remembered. "Mason," I started, but he cut me off. "There's more," he said, his voice shaking. "But I need to say something first." And that's when I saw fear in his eyes, the kind I'd never seen before. Not when he faced bullies, not when he lost his job last year, not ever. Whatever he was about to say, it was going to change everything. The streetlight cast a soft glow over Mason's face, carving shadows into his features that made him look both familiar and foreign. I clutched the keychain, its weight grounding me as my pulse hammered in my ears. "Say it," I whispered, my voice barely steady. "Whatever it is, just say it." Mason ran a hand over his buzz cut, a nervous habit he'd had since we were kids. "I've been thinking about this for a while." He started, his words slow, like he was picking his way through a minefield. "About us. About me." My breath caught. Us. There was no usn't like that. Mason was straight. Always had been. I'd spent years burying any flicker of hope that he'd ever seen me as more than a friend. I'd dated other guys, flirted at bars, even fallen in love once. But Mason was always the untouchable constant, the one I could never have. And now he was standing here, under a flickering streetlight in San Francisco, looking at me like I was the only person in the world. "I don't know how to do this," he said, his voice cracking. "I've never got. This is hard." He took a step closer, close enough that I could smell the whiskey on his breath, the cedar cologne he always wore. "I've been trying to figure out why I feel so off when I'm with you lately. Not bad off. Just different." I swallowed, my mouth dry. "Different how?" He looked down, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Like I'm lying to myself. Like I've been lying for a long time." His eyes flicked up to meet mine, and there was something raw there, something that made my chest ache. "I'm not as straight as I thought I was. L." The words hit me like a freight train. I stood frozen, the keychain biting into my palm. "What?" I managed, my voice barely audible. "I don't know what I am," he said quickly, like he was afraid he'd lose his nerve. "Bi? Maybe. I don't have a label for it. All I know is I've been thinking about you, about us, way more than I should. And it's freaking me out. But it's also the only thing that feels real right now." My head spun. Mason, my straight best friend, the guy who dated half the girls in our high school, was telling me he had feelings for me. It didn't make sense. It couldn't. I'd spent so long convincing myself that my feelings for him were a dead end, a fantasy I'd locked away. And now he was tearing that lock apart. "Mason," I said, my voice shaking, "you can't just drop this on me. Not like this. Not on my birthday." "I know," he said, wincing. "I didn't plan it like this. I was going to give you the keychain, take you to the bar, make it a good night. But then I saw you in that stupid red blazer, laughing like you didn't have a care in the world, and I couldn't keep it in anymore." I took a step back, needing space to breathe. The city hummed around Usker's honking, a street performer strumming a guitar nearby, but it all felt distant, like we were in a bubble. "So what are you saying?" I asked. "You're into guys now?" "Into me?" "I don't know about guys," he said, his voice raw. "I just know about you. I know I think about you when I'm supposed to be thinking about work, or my ex, or anything else. I know I hate it when you go on dates with other guys. I know I want to be around you all the time, and not just as your friend." My heart was doing things it had no business doing, like it was trying to break out of my chest. I wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt. But I'd been burned before. Not by Mason, never by him, but by hope. By guys who said one thing and meant another. "Mason, you're straight," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "You've always been straight. What if this is just, I don't know, a phase, a mid-20s crisis?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might back off, laugh it off like he always did when things got too heavy. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped closer, so close I could see the flecks of green in his blue eyes. "It's not a phase," he said. "I've been feeling this for months. Maybe longer. I just didn't know how to name it until now." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to grab him, kiss him, see if this was real. But the other part, the part that had spent years protecting my heart, was screaming at me to run. "I need time," I said finally. "This is a lot." He nodded, his expression a mix of relief and disappointment. "Yeah. Okay. I just needed you to know." We stood there, the silence heavy between us. The keychain felt like it was burning a hole in my hand. I wanted to say something, anything, to make this moment less raw, but nothing came. Instead, I turned and started walking back toward the bar, my head a mess of emotions I couldn't untangle. Mason followed, keeping a small distance between us. The rest of the night passed in a blur. More drinks, more music, but the ease we'd always had was gone, replaced by a tension that made every glance feel electric. When we finally said goodnight, I couldn't shake the image of his face under that streetlight, the way he'd looked at me like I was his answer to a question he'd been asking himself for years. Back in my apartment, I sat on my couch, the keychain in my hand, staring at the words, "You are enough." I'd meant them for him, but now they felt like a challenge to me. Was I enough to trust this? To trust him? I didn't know. But as I fell asleep, the weight of his words settled over me like a blanket, warm and terrifying all at once. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a heart full of questions. The keychain sat on my nightstand, glinting in the sunlight that streamed through my window. Mason's words echoed in my head. "I just know about you." I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me like a persistent ache. I avoided his texts all day, not because I was angry, but because I didn't know how to respond. What do you say to your straight best friend when he tells you he might not be so straight after all? I spent the day wandering the city, my red blazer folded over my arm like a reminder of last night. San Francisco was alive with its usual chaos: street markets, drag queens handing out flyers, tech workers rushing to meetings. I ended up at Dolores Park, sprawled on the grass, staring at the sky and trying to make sense of it all. Mason wasn't the kind of guy to play games. He was honest, sometimes brutally so. But this was uncharted territory. I'd spent so long convincing myself that my feelings for him were a fantasy, a one-sided ache I'd carry forever. Now he was flipping the script, and I didn't know if I could handle it. My phone buzzed again, Mason's third text of the day. "Hey, you okay? I didn't mean to freak you out." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Finally, I typed, "Just need some space. I'll call you later." I didn't call. Instead, I went to meet my friend Lila at a cafe in the Castro. Lila was a trans woman I'd met at a queer book club, sharp-witted and fiercely loyal. Over coffee, I spilled everything: Mason's confession, the keychain, the way my heart was caught between hope and fear. "Honey," Lila said, stirring her latte, "this sounds like a rom-com, but with higher stakes. You've been in love with this guy forever, haven't you?" I groaned, burying my face in my hands. "Not forever. Just a long time. But he's straight, Lila. Or he was. I don't know what to do with this." She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Okay. First, he's not straight anymore. At least not entirely. Second, you need to talk to him. Like, actually talk. Not hide in the park like a dramatic gay cliché." I laughed despite myself. "I'm not hiding. I'm processing." "Process faster," she said, smirking. "You've got a hot guy who's basically confessing his feelings for you. Don't let fear screw this up." She was right, but fear was a powerful thing. I'd been out since I was a teenager, faced rejection from family, dealt with the occasional slur shouted from a passing car. I'd built walls to protect myself, and Mason had always been safely on the other side of them. Letting him in meant risking everything: our friendship, my heart, the comfort of the life we'd built together. That evening, I finally texted him back, "Meet me at the pier tomorrow. Noon." He replied instantly, "I'll be there." The next day, Pier 39 was crowded with tourists snapping photos of sea lions and vendors selling clam chowder in bread bowls. Mason was waiting by the railing, his leather jacket from the thrift store slung over his shoulder. He looked nervous, his usual confidence replaced by something softer, more vulnerable. "Hey," he said as I approached, his voice cautious. "Hey," I replied, shoving my hands in my pockets. The ocean sparkled behind him, the air sharp with salt and promise. "So, about last night." He nodded, his eyes searching mine. I meant what I said. Every word. "But I get it if you need time. Or if you don't feel the same." My heart lurched. "It's not that I don't feel the same," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "It's that I've felt this way for years. And I never thought you'd. I mean, you're Mason. You're the straight guy who punches bullies and dates girls named Ashley." He laughed, a short, nervous sound. "Yeah, well, Maybe I'm not that guy anymore. Or maybe I never was. And I just didn't know it. We stood there, the crowd swirling around us, the sea lions barking in the distance. I wanted to reach for him, to close the gap between us. But I couldn't. Not yet. What happens now? I asked. I don't know, he admitted. But I want to figure it out. With you. The words hung between us, heavy with possibility. For the first time, I let myself imagine us. Together. Not as friends, but as something more. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and everything in between. But before I could say anything, my phone buzzed with a call from my mom. I ignored it, but the moment was broken. Let's walk, Mason said, nodding toward the boardwalk. We don't have to figure it all out today. So we walked, side by side, the keychain in my pocket a quiet reminder of the words we hadn't yet said. The boardwalk stretched out before us, a chaotic blend of street performers, souvenir shops, and the endless rhythm of the ocean. Mason and I walked in silence at first, the weight of his confession still lingering like fog over the bay. I kept stealing glances at him, trying to reconcile the Mason I'd known for a decade with the one who'd just turned my world upside down. So, I said finally, breaking the quiet, how long have you been thinking about this? About me? He kicked a pebble, watching it skitter across the wooden planks. A while. It started small. You know. Like, I'd notice how you laugh at my dumb jokes. Or how you always know when I'm having a rough day without me saying anything. Then it got bigger. I'd catch myself staring at you, wondering what it'd be like to. He trailed off, his cheeks flushing. To what? I pressed, my heart racing. He stopped walking, turning to face me. The wind ruffled his hair, and for a moment, he looked so young, like the boy who'd stood up for me in high school. To be closer, he said softly. To hold your hand. To kiss you. My breath hitched. I'd imagined those words 1,000 times, but hearing them from Mason was like stepping into a dream I wasn't sure I could trust. Mason, you can't just say stuff like that, I said, my voice shaky. Not unless you mean it. I do mean it, he said, his eyes steady. I'm scared as hell. But I mean it. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But I'd seen too many stories like this straight guys experimenting, getting cold feet, leaving broken hearts in their wake. What if you change your mind? I asked. What if you wake up tomorrow and decide this isn't you? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned against the railing, looking out at the water. I've been asking myself that for months, he said. I talked to my sister about it. You know, she's the only one I told. She said I need to stop overthinking and just feel. Your sister knows. I asked, surprised. Mason's sister, Claire, was a no-nonsense lawyer who'd always been supportive of me. But I hadn't expected this. Yeah, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. She told me I'm an idiot for waiting this long to tell you. I laughed, the tension easing slightly. Claire's not wrong. We started walking again, the conversation shifting to lighter things work. The city, the ridiculous tourists posing with the sea lions. But the undercurrent was still there, a pull I couldn't ignore. Every time our shoulders brushed, it felt like a spark, like the air itself was charged with possibility. That night, Mason insisted on cooking dinner at his place. His apartment was a small, cluttered space in No Valley, filled with hiking gear, vinyl records, and a couch that had seen better days. He made pasta with a sauce that was somehow both burnt and underseasoned. But I didn't care. We sat on the floor, eating off mismatched plates, laughing about the time we'd gotten lost on a camping trip and ended up sleeping in his truck. As we washed dishes, our elbows bumping in the tiny kitchen, I felt it again, that pull, that ache. I caught him watching me, his eyes soft in a way that made my chest tight. What? I asked, drying my hands on a towel. Nothing, he said, but he didn't look away. Just, you. My heart stuttered. Before I could overthink it, I stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of his body. Mason, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. If we do this, it's not just a fling. Not for me. I know, he said, his voice just as quiet. It's not for me either. And then he kissed me. It was tentative at first, like he was testing the waters. But then it deepened, and I felt everything years of longing. The fear, the hope all crashing together. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer. And for a moment, the world was just us. Just this. When we pulled apart, both of us breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Was that okay? He asked, his voice raw. More than okay, I said, smiling despite the tears prickling my eyes. But we need to talk about this. Really talk. He nodded, his hand still on my waist. Yeah, let's talk. We stayed up half the night, sprawled on his couch, untangling our feelings. He told me about the moments that had shifted things for him, watching me dance at a friend's wedding. The way I'd stayed up with him after his dad's heart attack. The quiet nights when we'd just sit and talk about nothing. I told him about my own struggles. The way I'd loved him quietly for years. The fear that letting him in could ruin us. By the time I left his apartment, the sky was turning pink with dawn. We hadn't figured it all out, but we'd made a start. And as I walked home, the keychain in my pocket felt like a promise of what? I wasn't sure, but I was ready to find out. The weeks that followed were a blur of joy and uncertainty. Mason and I were stepping into something new. Something neither of us had a roadmap for. We didn't put a label on it. Boyfriends felt too heavy. Too soon, but we were more than friends. We went on dates. Tentative at first. Like a coffee shop in the Mission or a late-night walk along the Embarcadero. Each moment felt like a discovery. A piece of him I'd never seen before. But it wasn't all easy. Mason was grappling with his identity. With what it meant to be attracted to a man after a lifetime of being the straight guy. He'd tense up sometimes. Especially in public. Like when a group of guys at a bar gave us a look that lingered too long. I'd catch him second-guessing himself. His confidence faltering under the weight of questions he didn't have answers for. One night, we were at a queer open mic in the Castro. A cozy spot filled with poets and singers spilling their hearts. I'd convinced Mason to come, thinking it might help him feel more comfortable in this new world. He sat beside me, his knee bouncing under the table, his eyes darting around the room. A poet was on stage, reading a piece about coming out to their parents. And I noticed Mason's hands clench. You okay? I whispered, leaning closer. He nodded, but it was tight. Just a lot, he said. I didn't grow up around this. I don't know how to be this. I reached for his hand under the table, squeezing it gently. You don't have to be anything. Just be you. He looked at me, his expression softening. You make it sound so easy. It's not, I admitted. But you're not alone. That night, back at my apartment, we talked more. He told me about his dad, a gruff ex-Marine who'd never been big on emotions, let alone anything outside the norm. If I tell him about us, Mason said, staring at the ceiling, he might not get it. He might not want to. Then we deal with that together, I said, my voice firm. But only when you're ready. He turned to me, his eyes searching. How do you do it? Be so out. So sure. I laughed softly. I'm not always sure. I just got tired of hiding. And having you in my corner helped. A lot. He smiled, pulling me closer. Guess I've got a lot to learn from you. Then. But the doubts weren't just his. I had my own. Every time he hesitated, every time he pulled back from a touch in public, I wondered if this was too much for him. If I was asking him to be someone he wasn't. Lila noticed it too. When we met for brunch one Sunday. He's trying. Elliot, she said, cutting into her pancakes. But you need to decide what you're okay with. If he's not ready to be out, are you okay with that? I don't know. I admitted. I want to be. I want to give him time. But I've spent so long being open about who I am. I don't know if I can go back to hiding. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. Love's messy, especially when it's new. Just don't lose yourself in it. Her words stuck with me as Mason and I grew closer. We spent Thanksgiving together, just the two of us, cooking a turkey that was somehow both overcooked and raw. We laughed until we couldn't breathe, and when he kissed me over the dishes, it felt like home. But there were moments when he'd dodge questions about us from coworkers, when he'd tense up at the mention of meeting my queer friends that reminded me how fragile this was. One evening, as we sat on my balcony watching the city lights, he turned to me, his face serious. I want to tell people about us, but I'm scared I'll mess it up. You won't, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. But we don't have to rush. We'll figure it out together. He nodded, but I could see the weight on his shoulders. And I wondered, not for the first time, if love was enough to bridge the gap between who we were and who we were becoming. Christmas came, and with it, a test neither of us was ready for. Mason wanted me to come to Sacramento for the holidays, to meet his family as, well, not just his friend. It was a big step, one that made my stomach churn with both excitement and dread. I'd met his family before, but always as the best friend, the quirky gay guy who made everyone laugh. This was different. We drove up together, the keychain dangling from his rearview mirror like a talisman. The ride was quiet at first, the hum of the highway filling the space between us. You nervous? He asked, glancing at me. Terrified, I admitted. Your dad's not exactly the warm and fuzzy type. He laughed, but it was strained. Yeah, well, neither am I sometimes. But I want them to know. About us. I nodded, my throat tight. Okay, let's do this. His parents' house was a modest ranch-style home, decorated with twinkling lights and a slightly lopsided Christmas tree. His mom, Linda, hugged me like I was her own son. But his dad, Tom, just gave me a nod and a handshake. Claire was there too, her knowing smile a small comfort. Dinner was a blur of small talk and mashed potatoes, but I could feel the tension building, like a storm waiting to break. After dessert, Mason cleared his throat. I've got something to say. He started, his voice steady but his hands gripping the table. Elliot and I, we're together. Like, together. The room went silent. Linda's eyes widened. Claire hid a smile behind her wine glass. And Tom just stared, his fork frozen midair. I braced myself, my heart pounding. That's so? Tom said finally, his voice gruff. Didn't see that coming. Mason's jaw tightened. Yeah, well, neither did I. But it's real. Linda reached for Mason's hand, her eyes soft. I just want you to be happy. Honey. Both of you. Tom didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he stood, muttering something about needing air, and walked out. Mason's face fell, and I felt a pang of guilt, like I'd brought this storm into their home. Later, as we sat by the fireplace, Claire pulled me aside. Give Dad time, she said. He's old school, but he loves Mason. He'll come around. I hope so, I said, but I wasn't sure. That night, Mason and I shared a guest room, lying side by side in the dark. I'm sorry about my dad, he whispered. It's okay, I said, reaching for his hand. It's not your fault. But it wasn't okay. Not really. I could feel the cracks forming, the weight of his family's reaction pressing on us. When we got back to San Francisco, Mason was quieter, more withdrawn. He still held my hand, still kissed me, but there was a distance I couldn't bridge. One night, at a New Year's Eve party in the Mission, things came to a head. The party was at Lila's place, a colorful loft filled with queer friends and allies. Mason was nervous, his usual charm replaced by a quiet unease. When a guy I'd dated briefly, Javier, showed up and hugged me a little too long, Mason's face darkened. Outside, under the fireworks, he pulled me aside. "Do you ever think about going back to that?" he asked, his voice tight. "To guys who, get this, who don't have to figure it out." I stared at him, hurt and anger flaring. "Is that what you think? That I'd rather be with someone else because you're new to this?" "I don't know," he said, running a hand over his face. "I just feel like I'm screwing this up. Like I'm not enough." The words hit me hard, echoing the keychain he'd given me. "You are enough," I said, my voice breaking. "But you have to believe it too." We stood there, the fireworks bursting overhead, and I realized we were at a crossroads. We could keep going, keep fighting for this, or we could let it break us. And I wasn't sure which way we'd go. The new year brought clarity, but not without pain. Mason and I took a step back, not breaking up, but giving each other space to breathe. He needed time to figure out who he was, and I needed to figure out what I could handle. We still saw each other coffee here. A hike to rebut the ease we'd once had was gone, replaced by a cautious tenderness. One afternoon, as we sat in a park overlooking the bay, Mason broke the silence. "I've been talking to a therapist," he said, his voice steady. "About all of this. About me. About us." I looked at him, surprised. "That's good. Really good." "Yeah," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'm starting to get it. I don't have all the answers, but I know I love you, and I'm not scared of that anymore." My heart leapt, but I held back. "What about your dad? Your friends? The rest of the world?" He shrugged, his eyes fixed on the water. "My dad's coming around. Slowly. And my friends, the ones who matter, will stick around. The rest can go to hell." I laughed, the sound breaking the tension. "You sound like me now." "Maybe you're rubbing off on me," he said, nudging my shoulder. We started again, slower this time, more deliberate. We went to Pride events together, Mason's hand in mine, his nervousness fading with each step. He told his coworkers about us, weathered their questions with a quiet strength I hadn't seen before. And when his dad finally called to apologize, to say he wanted to understand, Mason cried, and I held him, feeling the weight of years lift off his shoulders. By spring, we were living together, our thrift store jackets hanging side by side in the closet. It wasn't perfect, there were still fights, still moments of doubt, but it was real. And when Mason kissed me under the cherry blossoms in Golden Gate Park, the keychain in my pocket, I knew we'd found something worth fighting for. Love, I realized, wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, about choosing each other even when it was hard. Mason had given me a gift that night outside the bar, not just a keychain, but the courage to be himself, and the chance for us to build something new. And as we walked hand in hand through the city that had brought us together, I knew we were enough.